get us rolling here. Happy Wednesday, everyone. My name is Brad Kloffenstein. For those of you who don't know me, I am president of the Greater Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. I would like to thank you all for joining us for this week's edition of Chamber Chat. This week, we are very honored to have with us Dr. Shawn Smith from the Lawrence Township School Corporation. He is here to talk about schools, the status of Lawrence Township schools, and what we have to look forward to coming up on this next school year. So without further ado, Dr. Smith, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Brad, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly honored to be with you. This is a little bit different from my style, talking on a computer, but we will make it work. Those of you who know me, that I love being in the presence of everyone, but of course, with COVID-19, we have certainly changed how we communicate. Very much familiar faces that I'm used to. So I won't call people out. It's good to see Tom, and I see our trustee, Mr. Talley, on here, and Corey, I know you're hiding on there, but a lot of familiar faces here in Lawrence Township. I am your superintendent for your local school corporation. And then let me start off by just saying a few things for those of you that are not as familiar with us. You can't miss us. You probably drive by your schools now and you see 22 different buildings. We have over 16,000 students, which makes us right now the 9th largest school corporation in the state of Indiana. And we're one of the larger employers that are in the township. I lead an organization that has over 2,500 employees who oversee the day-to-day operations of educating kids. And so it's a really impressive organization. If you ever want to tour and come out and visit with us, I probably have the largest transportation logistic area in the township. We transport all 16,000 of those students. We also feed them every day. So we do a little bit of everything. Often we think of schools, we think of the traditional school which we attended and our school principal and our teachers, but from this level, we do it all. And it's really a joy because we have very strong schools and have for many, many years. But I want to start off the conversation because I know everyone wants to talk about the what if. And Dr. Smith, if we're going to go back to school and how things are going to work, we're living in really an historic time when we think about our schools. We have never had this amount of time out, away from teaching and learning inside of our buildings. And I truly mean that. And during my lifetime, I can never remember a period where schools have been closed this long. And so as a result of the virus, back in March, the entire county decided to send the kids home. And so for over 60 days, we did education through e-learning via computer technology. And certainly much different and quite frankly, quite difficult for us, but we were able to accomplish to close out the school year doing this as a result of COVID-19. So going forward, what are we going to do? And that's what we're working on now. We are now in plans within our school corporation and talking to the entire county and surrounding counties that are adjacent to Marion County and really throughout the state of Indiana to make a decision on how we're going to return our students back to our campuses. I will say this to all the business leaders in the community, we're going back to school at some point. And that's what we're working on now is how can we do this and assure that our 16,000 students and our valuable assets of our support staff and our teachers, more importantly, are going to be safe when we return to school August the 3rd. So you're hearing that from the superintendent. We're going to have school. We're going to return, but what will that look like once we come back in August? Because our whole environment of teaching and learning is social interaction. And to not have that is an incredible, incredible challenge for a school corporation. And quite frankly, for my parents that are out there, those of you who have children, it has rocked your world, having kids at home. And we love our children, but I'm not sure you were planning to have them home for 60 days. So, you know, and none of us did. You know, I still have a son that, you know, is in high school right now. It is very challenging, but more importantly, the interaction that students have with each other and their teachers is invaluable. So we're hoping to get through this virus, but create an environment where we can have school, do it safely, and go on and educate our kids. So for the first time in history, We didn't have our traditional high school graduation. We're hoping that we can pull that back in at the end of July and do a ceremony. But think about the class of 2020. They missed their prom. They missed their graduation. We missed winning the state championship in boys basketball. Those of you that know us in this community, we had one of the top boys basketball teams in the state of Indiana. We were going for the double because the girls won the state championship. Cancel in Indiana. No high school basketball. And so we are really struggling with that. And we're trying to figure out a way how we can get these youngsters back and do what we do as a public school. And that is educate all the students that are within our boundaries. So I wanted to put that out there right away just so that everyone will understand that we are now, our entire team of administrators and support staff, working on plans that will allow for us to return our students back to our campuses, all 22 buildings. So questions that anyone may have out there about that. I just want to put that out there because that will be the number one question I think everyone is having. Is Dr. Smith, we're going to have school.
Dr. Smith, I will ask you, because you touched on this just a little bit. You said you've been in communication with other townships. Which ones around the area are you in most communication with, and what's their sentiment on what all's happening?
Well, obviously, we're in Marion County, so all 11 Marion County school corporations interact with each other. We know each other. We then follow the umbrella and the guidance of the Marion County Health Department. So we have a lot of communication with Dr. Virginia Kane and her team. Obviously, with multiple mayors, we'll work with, for Lawrence, we work with the city of Lawrence and a lot of communication with Mayor Hogsett there in Indianapolis. So we do communicate a lot. And then we know what happens in the surrounding donut areas. Beyond that, we don't typically go beyond the Marion County donut area because that's typically central Indiana. But the overwhelming sentiment is that all of us are certainly looking forward and moving towards opening up school. We also have communication with the Indiana Department of Education. They recently put out guidance for us on reentry. That is the governor's plan. And obviously the Department of Education is going to carry that out and hoping that schools will return. They're hoping to return the economy. With us not being in school has an impact on a lot of factors as far as the local economy and state economy. And so the goal is hopefully to get every single school corporation back.
So we can open this up to others that are here. I think Pam, you said you had a question?
Yeah.
Is that Pam Decker?
Pardon me?
Is Pam who?
Pam Leeper. Pam Leeper.
Pam Leeper, and Pam is from the
Reset Center.
Reset Center, yes. Yeah. Just past there. Post Road. Pam, I know you.
Yes, you do. When I was in school, you know, extracurricular activities were a big thing. You know, I know band is big in Lawrence, you know, football, singing. How are the extracurricular activities being addressed?
That was an enormous challenge. How do you social distance a sectional basketball game? We hosted one of the biggest, largest, best sectional basketball tournaments games in the state of Indiana. And how do you social distance that? It's almost impossible. So obviously with our different association, our state athletic association, the performing art groups will get together, is we will have to make a decision at some point, very similar to the professional leagues. Are we going to have live games, or we're going to have games and activities without spectators? Okay. And that's going to be very challenging because there's such a joy in our community for extracurriculars. Your marching band last year finished 6th in the state of Indiana. We have been state band champs. What's going to happen in late October, November for the Indiana State Band Contest? What's going to happen if we cannot have the marching band contest downtown at Lucas Oil? So those things will be made, decisions will be made very soon.
You mentioned the sectional. Didn't we have 3 or 4 COVID deaths come out of that sectional?
Yeah,
including
Tom.
The North Central's athletic director.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not going to blame that on our sectional.
I'm not blaming it.
Yeah,
it's social distancing.
Yeah, and it is related to that. and obviously at our section, we had a lot of high profile people. And I know Paul Logan personally, I've known him over 30 years. And unfortunately, with his personal health, he did pass away from COVID. We obviously had one of our assistant coaches at Lawrence North High School who experienced the same thing. So it is a very difficult call. Our job as a school corporation is to educate the kids, and then we're going to work very closely with our public health officials to make sure we do the right thing in terms of social distancing. For all of us, this is all new, and it did sneak up on everyone. And so we lean heavily upon the Marion County Health Department and their professionals when making decisions on how we're going to hold these events.
Thank you.
So now, Dr. Smith, for those who are like me, as we discussed kind of before we got together on this, you and I have had several attempts to get together. This is the first time I've ever actually been able to speak with you one-on-one, or in this case, 20-on-1. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in Lawrence.
Well, I am a native of Indianapolis, so I'm not unfamiliar with Lawrence Township. Was very familiar. Born and raised in the city. I attended the Indianapolis public schools, and I didn't really go far from my education, obviously. Graduated from Indiana University. I'm very well educated, as you well know, folks, from the state of Indiana, with all my degrees that I have. But what's most proud for me is that I've been able to have all of my formal and professional career right here in the county, from starting off as a teacher in Indianapolis public schools. I taught in Washington Township. I was a school principal in Washington Township. So if I mess anything up, you can blame the folks over in Washington Township. I was there for over 14 years, and it's incredible community is that a lot of people don't move far. So a lot of my former students are my parents now. And so I get a lot of Mr. Smith. When I hear that Mr. Smith, it's immediately Mr. Smith as a teacher or principal. And so it's really special. And then I spent 11 years working in Pike Township, from serving as a principal, a director, and assistant superintendent. And then almost 7 years ago, and I came in the coldest winter I think we ever had. And my first job as superintendent, I think we had to close school for a week. So I'm very popular amongst the students. The Board of Education decided to hire me as a superintendent. And during this last 7 years has been incredible. We've seen incredible growth. We've experienced incredible building, unbelievable things that have happened to the school corporation. And I'm just honored to serve.
Very good. So where do you see Lawrence Township 10 years from now on into the future? And where would you like to see Lawrence Township be?
Well, I'm not going to take credit for everything, but I thank you if you give me some credit, folks. I appreciate it. This community has had a long history of having incredible public schools and community support for public education. You went from being a very small school corporation in the 1970s and 80s, and people question, why did they build a second high school back in the late 70s? What? And then today it makes sense because we're a very large community, and making very good decisions about its local public schools. And so as superintendent, I have no choice but to serve the board and the community to make sure that we have the very best public education opportunities for the children that you can provide. So moving forward in 10 years, something that we've been working on the last 5 years was to prepare for that 10 years in terms of our facility plan. The school corporation has aged. Obviously, our facilities have aged, and we want to make sure that we have the very, very best facilities and resources. And so we went on a quest to implement a blue ribbon facility plan, and we're working on that right now. And when that plan ends, we will have renovated every single building at the highest level. So 10 years from now, the students that will be coming in will be, and matter of fact, that will be our kindergartners that will be coming in. They'll be graduating in 10 years. 12 years. And so we wanted to make sure that they have world-class facilities. And looking at the demographics of central Indiana, and in particular in Lawrence Township, as we look at demographers, and a lot of that has to do with a community is affordable housing. Lawrence is going to be around for 10 years. We already know that. So there's going to be people living in this vicinity, and we want to make sure that they have a quality public education system.
Nice. Sandra had her hand up for a question. Sandra, if you unmute your mic, you can go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sandra Crum, and I am a kindergarten teacher at ELC Whiting Ridge, and I have one question. My question is, as we know, we are in our ELC Whiting Ridge we are in Marion County, and in this situation with the COVID-19, we know that affects us more than other places. Then I don't know if that is going to be affect for the time, and because I don't know if we are going back to the school regularly in August 3rd or no. It's my kind of, I don't know what we can do for back to the school. That's good
question. August the 3rd is our start date for the 2021 school year, and we are working on plans now to execute that. Unless something dramatically changes, we do plan to start school August the 3rd. What that's going to look like is what we're working on now. And so we've got some huge meetings that will be coming up here with the Marion County Health Department that are going to really dictate what's going to happen with that, unless the governor decides again to extend the various stages, the stay-at-home orders, the closed school. We are planning to open up school. That's what our goal is to have school ready to go on August the 3rd.
Okay, thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Smith, I've got a couple questions for you. First one, are you hearing anything about from the state on how budgets are going to be impacted moving forward?
I always pay attention to that, ladies and gentlemen. Your local school corporations, and just so all of you understand, just a quick lesson on school finance. Yes, your property taxes do go to your local school district, but it doesn't pay for everything. The state of Indiana utilizes a school funding formula to determine how much money each school corporation in the state of Indiana will receive. And it's kind of this saying is that the money follows the kids. So obviously the larger your school corporation is, the more money you have. So we are very much, the Board of Education and I are very much attuned to what happens down on Capitol Street. And so there is talk about, obviously with COVID-19 and the issues with the economy, will we have enough money to fund our schools? And so I'm going to lean on the governor and our local legislators to make that decision. Obviously, my decision for them, my recommendation to them is that in order for us to keep our schools moving and keep the staff and the resources in place, we're going to need to fully fund public education. So we're watching, and we're certainly listening to what's going to happen. But with the return of the kids back to school, it's going to be almost impossible to open up without the resources. Those 16,000 students that are educated by those 2,500 employees are very much tied to the state of Indiana. And so we definitely want to push for fully funding our schools.
Very good. Now, I do have another question, and this one's going to be slightly different, but I think it's relevant at this time. What are your thoughts about today's racial climate and how that's going to impact classrooms when we come back?
Yeah. Well, last Friday, ladies and gentlemen, in your community, you had probably one of the first communities. This was led by students, and I got a call, and next thing I know, we're going to have a rally. And I showed up with over 500 plus people in Lawrence Park over here at the youth football field for a rally for social justice and racism. Your community is extremely diverse, naturally, and has been for many, many years. If we are not having a dialogue about race and social justice, we're going to have a problem. So the kids obviously showed us something that they could organize in one day, 500 plus people, with us or without us. And so I decided to join, and other leaders in the community, including Mayor Collier, Mr. Talley, our Township trustee was there, and several other people were there. And it brought about a little emotion because the kids really wanted to talk about what is going on in our country. Obviously, I'm an African-American male. I'm a middle-aged man, and I don't think there's any room for racism and social injustice in our country. There shouldn't be. And there are incredible people from all backgrounds and races who can contribute to the common good of a community. And that's what we do in Lawrence Township. When I walk into my schools, I see every race and every nationality. The state of Indiana may not be diverse, but you are the beacon of diversity and hope in Lawrence Township, naturally. And all of our schools truly reflect that. And so as a public institution, we have a moral obligation to assure that our children are educated from all backgrounds, regardless of race and gender. And we certainly do that. And we want to teach kids the importance of respect of all races. And so we do teach those characters within our school corporation. And so I think it's a non-issue for Lawrence, but we've got to continue to have that dialogue and work to make it better. Diversity is reflected in all forms of our staff and our administrative staff. Our Board of Education has adopted human dignity and racial social justice policies to assure that our community is upholding that. So there are some action steps that we have in the community, but we've got to continue to have a dialogue about what we've seen here in the last couple of weeks and do it openly. And I think once we return back to school, you will see our schools do that.
So what were the concerns of the students? Or did they express that to you?
I think what I saw last week, I was in a meeting yesterday, and some communities struggle with this in Indiana, to have that type of conversation and dialogue. We don't here. I think what I learned last week is that our kids are very much attuned to what's going on in the world. I'm older. I have a 24-year-old daughter. I have 3 children. 2 are adults, and I'll have a senior at Lawrence Central. And ladies and gentlemen, we don't think young people know what's going on. We have lost our mind. With social media, they have access to information, conversations, and trends just like that instantaneously. And so their view of the world is totally different than ours. And I've had to come to that realization as a dad, as a school leader, that our young people are very much attuned to what we're doing. And they're calling us out. They're questioning the society in which we live in. We say this, but you do this. Why does this happen, Dad? And then I see this. And so what type of action steps are we taking to assure that everyone that lives in the community all over this country is treated fairly and have a fair opportunity to live and to be a productive citizen?
So now there was a question that came through in the chats here. Obviously, as you mentioned, Lawrence is incredibly diverse. And it's not just black, white, but Hispanic, Latino, and the list goes on. I'm not even sure how many languages are represented in the Lawrence Township schools, other than I would expect it to be a lot. Now that we've been through remote learning, what have the challenges been on keeping all students engaged? How do you spread information throughout those different communities so that they're staying up on their lessons? What are the teachers doing to make sure that those kids aren't falling behind?
And a very, very good question. And we know exactly who's engaged and how many. We monitor that every day. We have roughly about 10% of our population who struggle with internet access. And when all the stores, the restaurants, and all of the public libraries and everything closed, created a challenge for a portion of our population who don't have internet access. So we roughly are operating with about 90% of our students engaged. Those families that aren't engaged, we're trying to find a way to engage them and utilizing our social workers and our student services support to really get to those families. So we were operating at a very, very high level. I want to brag about Lawrence Township. This whole conversation about technology and devices, the Board of Education made a bold decision roughly about 7 years ago. Matter of fact, one of my first assignments as a superintendent was to figure out how to make the one-to-one device for every student in our corporation work. So we went down that road about 7 years ago, and then we had a conversation about doing e-learning. We decided we were not going to do e-learning unless we had professional development, support for our teachers, and we went through a year of working on that, and then all of a sudden this virus kicked off, and we were already in a great position to be able to implement it. So e-learning is not just give a kid a device and say, hey, we'll get on it. Teacher-student interaction, utilizing technology as we're doing today. And it requires a lot of training, a lot of time for those teachers to shift their classroom inward to outward. And we've been able to do that. And an overwhelming majority of our teachers have done a superior job with it. We're not satisfied. We're working to get better at it. We obviously know the benefit of the brick and mortars. We know the benefit of student-teacher interaction, which is more powerful than technology. We don't ever want to put that over to the side and say, we're going to just do teaching through a technology base. It's not going to work. When you're trying to teach a kid in 3rd grade how to read, this is okay. This is not the way to do it. So our teachers have embraced it. We have great communication with our families. We're working on how to get our parents more engaged with it and comfortable. I'm finding that my parents who are truly engaged, and really sometimes too engaged because they're doing the work for their kids, you know, how do we communicate a baseline where everything is okay? If they don't get everything done, it's not the end of the world. How do we work with the teacher to engage to make sure that we're working at every kid's level? Okay.
So I think Lawrence Township uses Canvas, which
it's one of our that's a platform, an online platform for the teacher and student to be able to engage each other.
Right, and from what I hear, the districts that were already engaged in Canvas, and and it helps when you have one-to-ones, one device per student. It helps, but I think that those districts were in a much better position to do e-learning than the ones who were not. So kudos to you for getting to that point. I know, schools are just like the businesses here in Lawrence. I mean, we all had to reinvent ourselves on the fly very quickly to get to this point, but it sounds like you were in a position to do well with what you had already, so that this wasn't a disaster and you weren't truly trying to make it up as you went.
Yeah, good point. Very much so. We obviously had a plan, and we have some challenges. As I said earlier, there are some families that just cannot afford internet access, and maybe one day the vision is in Lawrence Township, the entire township in the city of Lawrence, we have free public Wi-Fi. And if we had that, we would eliminate that gap. As a matter of fact, we eliminated the socioeconomic gap by providing a device equally for every student in our township.
So what does the township do to reach out to the Latino community and those students?
Yeah, and we are so fortunate to have we've had an immersion school, and I'm not going to take credit for that. I'll give that to Dr. Percy Clark and his vision years ago to create an immersion school in this district. And what it did is it created a commitment to bilingual education in this community. And so we have bilingual educators in every single one of our buildings. Communicating with non-English speakers is very easy to do. It's second nature for us. So we're able to break down that barrier and be able to communicate any way we need to with our Hispanic community.
Very nice. Any other questions from those assembled while we have Dr. Smith? I don't want to take up too much of his time.
I have a question.
All right.
This is Elia James, and I just wanted to know what preparation do teachers have? I know there's been a big influx of Latinos from Central America. What kind of trainings, cultural training specifically, like do they receive any type of preparation to work with these different cultures and understand a little bit more about them? Because I know that can be a challenge.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that question. And we offer professional development and training on all type of things. And cultural training is something that is available for our teachers, but I think it's deeper than that. I think we have to hire teachers that understand the value system of that community, and understanding that when you work in Lawrence Township, you need to come ready-made to understand to work with a diverse group of people. We're not going to allow you to not accept the different groups of families that we have. I'm not just talking racially. We have some of the highest gaps in socioeconomic in the state of Indiana. And sometimes people forget about that with Lawrence. I have some of the most wealthiest people in the state and some of the poorest that sit in the same schools. So how do you deal with that as well as deal with racial? We deal with language. And so we really work hard to hire people who understand who we are and the diversity that we have. And we do that through our interviewing process. And we do so also make a commitment to hiring a very diverse workforce in our school corporation.
All right. Well, Dr. Smith, thank you very much for your time. I'm supposed to tell you you were missed today at the Northeast Indianapolis Rotary Club meeting today at lunch. I was their speaker. They gave me a pen and everything.
First class, Brad. And I'm sorry, my fellow Rotarians, I couldn't be there. Those of you who know me as a superintendent, I go to everyone. Tom, the Kiwanis Club, I'll come. You and Corey lead that, and the Exchange Club, and all the various groups that we have in this community, and including the Lawrence Chamber, are just wonderful partners for us as a school corporation. We are a part of you, folks. Your local school corporation is here to serve. People ask, what do we do? Well, we train the next generation of workers. We just released 1,210 graduates from Lawrence Township. And that's about the number we have every year. And that's a lot of young people who are going to be going out into the community to be taxpayers, workers, college graduates, successful, NBA basketball, but we got them all. And we can't do that without all of us, the adults and businesses and local community groups who support what we do. So I say kudos to all of you and thank you for supporting us. And Brad, I will be back with my Rotarian soon.
Okay, very good. Well, Dr. Smith, I want to thank you very much for your time. This has been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to sitting down with you next week and getting to know you better. For those of you who are here, upcoming chamber events we have. Tonight, we're having our cruise in. That's every Wednesday night. That occurs on Otis Avenue, kind of right behind La Hacienda. On June 25th, we're having our first in-person after hours. That's going to be at Porter Books and Bread on Lawton Loop East Drive. That's going to be from 4:30 to 6:30. I don't have our guest for our chamber chat next week, but I'm sure it will be somebody good. In 2 weeks, we're going to go back and try again to have Common Council President Lisa Chavis join us, hopefully minus all the Russians this time. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, Dr. Smith, thank you for joining us, and I will see you all next week, if not before.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.